Welcome to Planning Phase Syndicate, our Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode 36. We're going to be talking about PQ preparation tonight. We're going to be looking over some decks to kind of give you some ways to practice because PQ season starts here up in a little over 2 weeks. So if you're grinding those games, getting ready to go compete, and you don't want to just take a random deck, tonight is the night you get to talk a lot about that. So it's going to be kind of fun. I got Alex and JJ joining me here in just a second. That being said, let me bring in my co-host for tonight. Please welcome JJ. Thank God you got a better hat. How are you tonight, sir?
Just recovering, man. Had a bit of a medical episode last weekend that threw me in for a loop, and just recovering. But I'm glad to be here tonight, covering some more swoop, man. Definitely needed, and I can't find my other hat, and I just happen to have this one here, so I put it on.
I mean, they lost this week, so hopefully you did not wear it while they were losing. Like, hopefully this is not like some bad omen you're giving us.
The funniest thing is the people that still like saying like Detroit is like they're not going to make it, and I'm like, you're like 12-2, and you have like 16 defenders that are injury reserve. Like how where is this criticism coming for the Detroit Lions? They're not the New York Giants, all right? Like,
yeah, this is a year that is felt a lot better. And this, like, it was kind of funny because they were talking about this like last year, right? Like, but their run, like, can they sustain this more than 1 year? And it kind of looks like they can.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very weird game. If you watched the Bills game, I didn't get to see much of it. I don't remember what we had that night. We had something going on that night. I don't remember.
Yeah, 5 touchdowns, apparently not enough to win a game. So yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, I forgot. That's what we did this weekend. I had a crazy weekend. My daughter had her like concert for band, and then after that we had tickets to go see a buddy of mine taped his comedy special. And so the wife and I were like, oh, we're gonna go out for dinner ahead of time, and then we're gonna go to this comedy special. And so this is funny. So like they say they had a 2-drink minimum, and my wife doesn't really drink. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just order either something expensive or I'll just drink your drinks, I guess. And then they weren't like being super strict about it, but they were like, yeah, we really want everybody with 2 drinks. So I just ordered like a double scotch, or like a nicer double scotch. I didn't drink anything at the restaurant before, so I was like, this should be no big deal. Then before the first comedian comes out, they go, hey, we're going to give everybody in the audience a shot of Jameson. Do you guys do Jameson? Does anybody not drink? And like 4 people like raise their hand. Like my wife raises her hand. They gave her a shot anyway, like for the picture, because they're filming it, right? So like obviously that's part of the film, I'm assuming. And so I did my shot, and then my wife's like, here, you got to drink mine quick. I'm like, fuck. So there's another shot, and the guy next to me is like, yeah, you said you like Jameson. He's like, I don't really like it. And I was like, okay. He's like, here, you can finish mine too. I was like, oh great. So I just had 3 shots. I can't get up and pee at all because like they don't want you to get up during the recording. And we're in this like super tiny ass bar that they're doing this video in. And it's like, oh my God, like this is like, and then I got my scotch on top of that. So I looked at the wife. I was like, I hope to God you're going to drive home tonight, because there's no way I could do 3 shots of Jameson, a double scotch in 1 hour and still be able to drive home. Like that's bad. That would be bad. Comedy special was amazing. Just, all that alcohol was crazy. So,
yeah.
Also joining me tonight is Alex, the bench warmer. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm okay, I guess. I just had a busy couple of weeks, so trying to unwind, I guess.
Fair enough.
Nothing crazy.
Yeah, well, we got some PQ talking tonight. Hopefully that will be fun for everybody. We're going to do a little bit of academy training. We're going to talk a little bit about picking a deck, kind of how to practice, some sideboarding, and then we're actually going to talk about some of the meta decks and like talk through them. And this is probably where Alex shines a lot, because Alex likes to get really in depth with these deck lists. Like that's like his thing, is to like go super in depth and talk about different like play lines and things that he may change up. And so I'm kind of excited for tonight. I won't lie and tell you that I have a deck picked out for the PQ in 2 weeks, because I don't. But I don't know. Alex, do you have a deck pick out? You're going the same PQ I am, aren't you?
I am, but yeah, I don't even know what color I want, let alone like a deck picked out. I don't even know if I want to do heroes or villains. I
Ugh.
haven't really. There's a wealth of options out there, and I haven't really been able to practice too much lately. So it's just kind of figure out eventually. As is my MO.
Fair enough. Well, let's get into it. Let's get into some academy training here. All right, welcome to our first segment for tonight. We're going to be talking about PQ preparation, and then we're going to get into some like deck-specific types that we want to talk about, like some actual decks that are meta decks, and talk through them. So what I did is I kind of said, okay, hey, if you're going to prep for a PQ, kind of what are some of the like things that you got to do? You got to pick out a deck, right? You know, you got to practice your deck. You got to talk about, you know, how are you going to sideboard, and then you know how you want to pick your deck. And so like I think like the difference is like understanding, like I can't tell you what to play because every play style is a little bit different. And I think that's one of the big things that we want to kind of address tonight, because like for example on my side, I'm mainly a control player, but aggro is running pretty well, and aggro is having a really good time into a lot of the meta right now. And so it's kind of one of those things. Do you switch off of control, start playing aggro? Do you stay true to your roots? Or are you going to be like Alex and just randomly pick a deck the night before and say, this is what I'm flying? Or I guess piloting, because we're not technically flying ships anymore.
Yeah.
That's what we used to do. We used to pilot ships, and now we're not. So, but the other big thing is how do you practice, you know, kind of like, what do you do for sideboarding? You know, and I think that's a big thing. Sideboarding is a big thing, and it's really hard to talk about sideboarding because like, we now actually have a wealth of cards. I think nobody would disagree with me. Like before, we didn't have, like when you had a small pool, it was pretty easy. What are you going to sideboard in? Well, these cards all suck. So you usually had like 1 or 2 extra cards, and it was a pretty easy choice. Nowadays, we've got 3 sets. We're going into set 4. There's so much more to pick from, you know, than we ever had before. And now that the meta changes a little bit, then you kind of have that as well. I will say, if you want resources, there is some people out there doing deck techs. If you don't want to pick your deck, I think that's kind of a thing, right? I mean, we've done a few deck techs, but not a lot of them. And I don't know, maybe we should change that and do more deck techs. Maybe we should just make our whole podcast just deck techs and nothing but decks. I don't know. We never did a Thrawn deck tech, though. I think I should do a Thrawn deck tech.
Yeah, that Thrawn deck is pretty nice, man.
It's so much fun. Thrawn is so much fun. I'm actually still considering Thrawn for the PQ if we're going to see more control. But we'll talk about that in a little minute. So Alex, when you want to pick a deck, what goes into you personally deciding what deck you want to pick? And why haven't you picked one yet?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah. That's what our podcast is. Loaded questions,
sure,
baby.
You had to start with me, who has literally no idea. I don't know. It's kind of like I'll choose a leader that's like really fun for me to play, like a Balba or something like wild out of there. Like my Boba or whatever, the hero Boba, and just kind of we'll figure out something that works super well with that, right? Try to build around it. Palpatine, he deploys really late. He steals stuff, so naturally you want to go like end game with him. So you figure out a color that will get you to the end game. Like yellow, you have a lot of exhaust and bounce and stuff like that. So it helps you get to the end game. Cad Bane unit really takes care of a lot of boards. But also you could do like blue, where it's just like you just straight have ways of just taking out, with takedown or power of the dark side or all that kind of stuff. So really it's like choose a leader that you like having fun, figure out what you think you want, like where you want your game to end. If you're like Sabine, you probably want it earlier, so you want to go more aggro heavy, so you work out on that, and then choose a color that works around there. And if that doesn't work, maybe try a different color. And then just choose whichever one you have the most fun with, or if you think your particular leader is good against generally what people are bringing. It's a little bit different now that like Bulba Villeneuve was banned, so Before that, it was pretty easy. It's like, oh, hey, if this is like really good against Boba, that's probably going to be a decent chunk of my field. So you have to keep that in mind. Now it's more like stick to my game plan, try to execute it as well as I can, and hope I don't get any crazy weird matchups.
Fair enough. JJ, how about you? What goes for you into picking some sort of a deck? Is there something you like that you want to pick more or less, or do you just are you just saying, hey, I'm gonna net deck whatever is popular?
So I tend to go on my own, right? Like I do respect people that build very successful decks that end up becoming meta decks and stuff. And, I use them as a reference to see sometimes, how certain combinations work and stuff. So I use them mainly as a reference. But for me, I tend to go on my own and choose a play style in particular. Now, for me, I tend to play a lot more aggressive decks that immediately right out the gate like to attack more. I like to push out damage a lot more. So I try to build my decks around that and pick leaders based around that. But I also have to be conscious of the things that I'm weak against, and that's where I have to take my time to consider what I'm putting in my sideboard at that point. So that way, in the event that I do run into those decks that make it harder for me to play aggressive, I can have some type of answers for it. Although I can't tell you how many times where I put in sideboard cards into my deck and then I just never draw them for like the rest of the tournament. and it just happens, but that tends to be my play style. I like to build stuff of my own, go with the style of play that I like to go, and choose my leader and build around that particular play style and play it that way. Yeah.
Fair enough. I think when it comes to me for choosing my deck and understanding it, I think I like to go, okay, well, what is the meta? What is your play style? Like for me, the big thing is what is my play style and where does it fit into there? Like it is good to be versatile. And I won't lie and say will net deck if I need to. But for the most part, what I'm doing is I take a deck and I'll say, this is what I feel is strong against the type of meta. So in our meta, we have aggressive decks, right? We have our aggros, we have our tempo decks, we have mid-range decks, we have control decks, and then we have combo decks. And so there's all these different types of things. You have to say, well, what is the most popular decks that are out there? What are you going to see the most of? And personally, what I'll do is I'll sit down and I'll take all those things, and then I want to look at what are the counters for those decks to say, this one is that one is this. For example, like Bosk Blue used to be very competitive against Sabine. I don't agree that it's an unbeatable Sabine deck. I don't actually even agree that it has more than a 50% chance to win against Sabine all the time. Like, I actually think Cad Bane Target Town is a lot better into Sabine than Bosk Blue is. But it's a similar thing where they get to be the ping damage, and Bosk knows how to heal and different things. And if he can get his heal engine going and mill you enough, you're just out of luck, even as a Sabine player. But that's what I do, is I say, this is what my play style is. This is where things fit mostly for me. And then I turn around and say, what does the rest of my meta look like? So if my meta says I'm here and we have 80%, aggro decks, do I really want to run a control, like a hard control deck or something like that into aggro? Like, I have been playing a hard control Thrawn deck. I love it. It's amazing. You know what I lose to? Cad Bane Tarkin Town every time. Without fail, Cad Bane Tarkin Town. So, it's a lot harder to win some of those games when they can spam the board, and that's kind of what they're doing, is like aggro decks are learning, maybe I don't need some of these large and high-end units. I can go wider more often and that type of thing. So that's kind of how I personally pick my deck. What's my play style? Then I look at all the other decks and say, what is the majority out here? You could pick a deck based on your showcases too. Like, that's the thing. Some of us, I did that with Thrawn. I bought a Thrawn showcase, so I had a reason to play Thrawn decks. So I got a good deal on it. Like, the guy was local. He gave me a really good deal on it. So, yeah. So that was fun. Anything else about picking a deck that you guys want to cover? Anything else that comes to mind? All right. Yeah. Well, let's move on to practicing your deck. So obviously the first step is you want to pick a deck, but when you pick one, you got to say, hey, what goes into preparation for it, right? Like, what should I be playing against? And I can already hear Alex saying you should put Palpatine on this slide because you should be prepared for Palpatine. And I don't disagree. Palpatine is now creeping back into everything again. And I do actually kind of think that that's something that might have gone on the screen. If I had looked at the winning decks from this weekend that were not up when I built this slide. So Palpatine one event and like top 4 twice. So Palpatine is probably another thing you should be putting on here. But when you go, you want to start practicing, right? You want to prep for your deck. You want to prep on how are you going to play against different things. So JJ, do you have specific things you do when you go to practice for an event? And again, it doesn't have to be obviously SWU. Like we used to do this for X-Wing as well. Though SWU, it's a million times faster to play a game than it is X-Wing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when I like to practice, I try to get in quick games as much as I can, just to get as many encounters as I get. Like I'll practice with people locally here, just to try to like practice against particular like either mirrors or harder counters to like my style of list, just so I can get more practice against that. If by like turn 3 or 4, I could already feel the game getting away from me, then at that point, just hard reset, go back to the beginning, reset, draw again, and go from the beginning. This helps particularly well, especially when you draw bad early on. The point of it is to try to know when your hand is going to be set up ideally, and know the process there, how to set yourself up to success, and go on from there. Like I much learn a lot more from those quick little games than playing a practice round that goes into like 10 or 11 rounds, because at that point you're kind of just expanding a game that pretty much is going to be already decided, especially if I'm playing an aggro deck. So that's how I try to get some practice in, at least for the decks that I tend to play. So yeah.
Fair enough. Alex, do you have a preparation method?
I usually just try to see if any of my locals are want to make a concentrated effort into practicing a particular deck. Thankfully, we have a fair amount of people within like half an hour driving distance, right? So we can pull in quite a bit of people. So it's more like just, hey, let's get together, try to figure out a day, go all practice and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes that works. So yeah, just grinding it out, kind of like what JJ was saying. That's a very classic like X-Wing way of practice, right? Where it's just like, oh well, we hit the point where it's like nebulous to try to continue doing this. So roughly the same applies for this.
Yeah.
So just as an off question, do you guys, like, if you're going to play locally, so do you go and say, hey, I need you to build these specific decks so that we could test against them? Or are you always the person that gets stuck building all the decks and then having to play them against the other people?
I bring extra decks with me just to make sure.
Yeah. We just try to coordinate beforehand. Just be like, hey, I'm bringing this deck. If anyone wants practice into that one, this is what I'll be doing, kind of thing. So it kind of works ish.
Yeah. I think one of the other things for prepping when you're practicing, and so however you choose to practice, I think the big thing is these are the top, 10 decks I would say you definitely need to be prepared for. And, even though Alex and I may disagree on how powerful Kira is and this and that, it's going to be something you're going to see. And I think that's the big thing, is understanding how your opponent is actually playing each of the different decks makes it super important. And that kind of will tie into our sideboard discussion here in a few seconds, because, for example, Sabine now sideboards different than she's ever done before. Django definitely has a very specific style sideboard that Django needs because of how Django is set up. Whereas Bosk is going to be kind of a little bit more of a wild card what they put in there, because Bosk is teching for certain aggro matches, and then most of the time it's other like control mirrors, and a little bit of mid-range. And so I think that's the big thing, is understanding what your opponent's going to play or what they could play and what you could possibly see. And so if you study the decks, for example, the SWU competitive website that we have linked all the time, they have a lot of the decks and people are submitting them now. And so you have the ability to kind of go see decks that people are playing. And I don't think you should have to play against every iteration, right? Like, I don't know. I don't play against every single Django deck out there, like, or every single Pelt deck. Like, it would be silly for me to do that. The big thing is understanding what are the most common, I would say, I don't know, I guess you guys could correct me if I'm wrong. I would say the most common 65% cards that are 65% pretty much guaranteed. Is that a fair number?
Yeah, I would say the common core of the deck. Yeah.
I mean, in Palpatine, if you're not running Emperor's Royal Guard, then I don't understand why you're running Palpatine. Like, period. Like, I just, like, don't run Palpatine then, I guess, you know? And that's kind of the same way as, like, I found that most CAD decks are not running Fire Spray. So you can mentally check that off your list. You don't have to worry about Fire Spray, but if they're running Django, you sure as heck know that they're going to be running Fire Spray. Or if they're running Hero Boba, you sure as heck know that they're going to be running Fire Spray. They could be running Fire Spray. And that would be something you would be like, oh my God, like, yeah, they got to pay 8 for it, but it is a ready ship that comes in and attacks and yada yada yada. So I think understanding what people's decks are helps get you through practicing your deck. And I think that moves us into understanding how to sideboard. Last time I did this, Alex gave me a whole bunch of crap because he's like, oh my gosh, you know how much goes into this? We could do probably 3 episodes on sideboard. And so we're not going to do 3 episodes on sideboarding. We're going to give a highlights of sideboarding. And I think, like, one of the big things that understanding in your sideboard, right, is understanding what cards are better in each matchup. And I think you can build your sideboard how you want. And when we talked a little bit earlier, right, and I told you my theory, and like what I do is I go and I look at what's the most popular decks. The sideboard pieces is what does your deck not do good against? For example, that Thrawn deck has a really hard time against certain aggro decks, like Cad Bane, for example. It has a very hard time against that because I can exhaust only so much before at some point I can't exhaust anymore. And if I entrench somebody and then I bring my stupid leader out, I lose my leader for a turn, and usually that's when everything kind of delves into a living hell, basically, for me. And so I think that's one of the big things, is understanding what goes into your matchup is the biggest point you can make. So Alex, when you build the sideboard, do you specifically build it in mind of what decks that you are going to be mostly seeing, or do you kind of do like a smattering of this is what I like because I know this defeats things and people aren't going to expect this type of thing?
Yeah, kind of a fair amount of it is just like, what is this generally weak against, right? Like, if I'm bringing Palpatine, you know, Sabine's a tough matchup, right? So my sideboard is going to be things that are like anti-aggro stuff, so I can take out the high-cost cards that I'm never going to play in our game and then replace them with things like Ground Sentinels, Space Sentinels, possibly some upgrade removal, board-wise, whatever it is. So a lot of that is like, what is not good? What am I not good against? Do I have any like massive glaring problems? Which is a lot harder in like mid-range, but it's pretty easy in like control. You can figure out what you're not good against. It's generally aggro. Depending. But yeah, other times it's like, hey, I have 2 copies of this in my deck. You know, if the game, like, I have 2 Devastators in my deck. If I'm going against like another control deck or a deck that's trying to reach the end game for a really long game, I'll put a 3rd Devastator in my sides. That way, like, I'll increase the odds of drawing it, or I can have multiple ones if they counter mine, kind of thing. So a lot of it's like, hey, this is my 3rd copy, or this is like specifically this, or, you know, like Space Django was a thing for, is a thing.
I think it's still a thing.
Yeah,
I don't think it went anywhere.
It is a thing. Yeah, it went down a little bit, I think. But yeah, it's very much a thing you might see. So it's like, well, do I add some extra Space Sentinels in my deck? Like, do I add a third Bright Hope, or do I just like sideboard a whole bunch of Bright Hopes if I'm hero, or do like I'm not running the Black Sun Space Sentinels? Maybe I just put 3 in my side deck in case I go against something like that. So it's like a lot of it's like theoretical, what I might be bad against. You can go with here. I'm just going to round out my really good card, or like my niche card that I have like 1 or 2 of, or then it's just like, hey, I would attack against whatever the meta is. Or if you're running red, you could just be like Red Ray. Don't really have hand destruction, like, discard cards, but they're I might need it against this, so I can have my sideboard like fully transform with like triple pillage and forced rows and stuff like that. So you can also have like a transformative sideboard, but that's a lot harder to do in this game,
especially with
than other
10
games.
cards. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that is the thing you can do.
Fair enough. JJ, how about you? Do you have sideboarding things? You're the guy that likes to run 1 off and 2 off cards as it is. Like, is your sideboard a 1 off, 2 off like session, or is that you're consistent?
As we've been getting more and more cards coming in, added into the game, it's become a lot more of like 2 offs. So I'll put in cards there that I'll put in as like replacement units. Like if I need to include or take out units that are not going to be as effective versus certain matchups, I can replace it with something else. Or for instance, for me, the biggest thing is if I know that I'm going to be playing against a deck that tends to have like bounties, or tends to have like the Dark Saber or stuff like that, I'll have a sideboard of the Fang Fighters, right? Because they can be deployed as a space unit, destroy and upgrade and stuff. But I'll keep them on the side, because if I know that I'm not going to be facing a list that doesn't have that in their deck, then I don't need it, right? So I'll try to keep a lot more utility cards in there, and keep them on the side. I won't bring them in as I need to. If I'm running against Bill, keep a couple of restocks in there just in case, to add in there. And it's always about adding utility into my decks, so that way I can just counter some of the particular moves that my opponent could potentially do against me. And that's how I tend to treat my sideboard.
Fair enough. And I think I'm very similar to that. Usually for me, it's always the weak awarenesses. And then I do typically put 1 spice card, sometimes 2 in my sideboard. Though recently I've been adding the spice directly to the deck because I'm crazy sometimes. Like Boba Fett's armor. Do you really need Boba Fett's armor for 3 Boba Fetts? Probably not, but it's super fun and nobody expects it. But
I don't even run that in my Boba deck.
I know you're crazy. It's because you don't care if you're Boba. You play Boba like you would be playing Kira. You don't care if it dies. You're like, I don't care. I'm here for everything else.
Boba's there for a temporary 1-turn buff that just wrecks the rest of the game. It's great.
Yeah. Now just imagine if you had Boba's armor on him, and then you would he might be there for 2 turns. See? Look at that, innovating your deck for you.
They just generally don't have a board when I flip Boba.
So yeah, so I also like a lot of times it's the glaring weaknesses, and then it's like different like bombs type thing. Like Alex is saying is like, I will say like season 2, I was running Devastators in my sideboard, and I was running Relentless main deck, and I was doing that because of control decks, because of frickin' Bosk, which was not, and a little bit Palpatine, but mostly just Bosk. And I ran that main deck, and it saved me in the PQ because I had to play 2 boss and a Blue Han. So there you go. Like, I mean, it worked twice for me very well. Just stopping people from being able to play events when I got it out. But that's the thing is, like, I will sometimes do that where I'll have something I use all the time. Like, for example, Scanning Officer was a great officer in Palpatine Green. It's not as much anymore because people aren't playing smuggle cards the same way they were. And if we don't get a bunch more smuggle cards, Scanning Officer's not as good as it used to be. So,
yeah, that's true.
the other thing I think that's like big into sideboarding or understanding your sideboard, right, is we talked a little bit about spice, right? And I think one of the big things is understanding what you need to swap out. Like, so I won't lie and tell you that I have a game plan every single time, and I don't think you have to have a specific game plan, but I think you have to know a little bit, and depending on what your opponent's playing. So, for example, against Django, if you have space stuff sided in, bringing space in is usually a benefit, unless you're playing against me, who doesn't run a lot of space in my Django deck. then you're just sad because you teched against the wrong part of the Django. But that's one of the things is like, like if I play a lot of cards, Pillage is a great sideboard card. I personally would run a complete hand destruction deck if we could make it work. I don't think it's like super viable, but it does work very well for the Rays of the world and the Hans of the world. They can run that Pillage and get that hand destruction. But we're seeing it being teched out of Bosk and put as a sideboard card. And that's because understanding that your opponent's going to sideboard and understanding the fact that game 1 is not actually as important as game 2 is. Game 2 is where it's at. Because if you could always win every single game, we'd have a broken deck, right? And that's what, like, to some extent, that's why Boba got put on that list, is because Boba didn't care as much. The sideboard was a lot less impactful because Boba Yellow and Boba Green could just do stupid bullshit things that, just allowed them to kind of take over the game a lot of the time. And so a lot of the time is understanding that your opponent's going to be sideboarding in as well makes it so that game 2 is very important. So knowing what you're going to sideboard, when you're going to swap it out, and how you're going to do it. The last thing, and then we'll move on to actually looking at some decks, because I'm more excited about going through decks per se and talking about them. But this is controversial. I personally, if I have to play against somebody that I know is just going to mill me out, I add my whole sideboard in. I don't know if you guys do that or not. I know it dilutes your deck down, but if you are going to have a hard time keeping units on the board and actually winning against a mill deck, do you guys just add extra cards in, or am I the only one that does that?
I was actually going to bring that up. It's like, hey, if you're going against someone who's going to mill you, you actually can just add your 10 cards in, which I've done before. I've done
I've absolutely done that. Yeah.
Some of them weren't super relevant, but like there's other times where it is.
Yeah. And I just say that because like, if they're expecting only 60 or 50 cards, and then you hit that 60, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but like it worked out very well for me. Especially when you had like 2 Relentless and 2 Devastators in hand when I had them in my hand against Boss, because I just waited till the end of the game when he had no more Pillage and crap to get rid of my cards. We don't all get to play endlessly, I guess. So. But yes, I think that's in my opinion, I feel that's a kind of a viable thing, is just embracing the fact that maybe you're going to have to do some stuff with Mill. If that becomes a bigger thing. I do know like Yoda Mill is a thing and Bosk Mill is obviously a thing. Though I think Bosk is turning a little bit away from just the direct mill route and moving towards like a heart control that has an end game instead of just a mill game. I think the mill is mostly just like an alternate win con. That's like, it's a benefit that your opponent might not have, but primarily you still want to do like the normal win kind of thing. Yeah. All right. Shall we move on to some of the decks?
Yeah.
We excited to talk about the actual decks?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the decks that I put together and that I pulled stuff for is essentially I kind of rated them as what I would consider like tier 1, tier 2, and then possibly what you would see. And we talked a little bit about it a few minutes ago, right? What do you have to do when you prepare? What are you going to be looking against? So this segment works out very well if you want to play one of these decks, or if you want to be playing a deck, you have to know that these are the decks that you're going to be faced up against. And the way I rated them is like tier 1 is ones that you're guaranteed to see no matter what. Like you're going to see those. If you play a 7-round event, you're guaranteed to see, I would say 3 or 4 out of all of those would probably be what you're going to see, at least this season. Tier 2 ones, you're going to see at least 1 or 2, and possible ones are kind of the ones that fall out of the woodwork that are things that I would say, hey, yes, they are possible. They could be something you could potentially run into, but are not a guaranteed type thing. So for example, like Luke there has not been seen a lot of recently, right? We haven't seen a ton of Luke, but Luke is still very good in my opinion, and Luke is something that like if somebody, for example, if somebody's been playing Luke this whole time, they could just bring Luke, redo the deck, and it's still a very bloody good deck, especially like into some of the other meta with the Jangos and the Cad Banes that are trying to pop shields. It's like, well, you can't just take my units down. Luke just says, here, I'm going to give everything a effing shield. Like everybody gets a shield today, which is really good against those ping decks. The other big thing is understanding that decks evolve and the meta evolves every week. So if you have higher end events, which we're actually seeing like 40 people events, which I wouldn't say is like super top end, where it's not like the 200 person events, but like I'd say a 40 person showing is a pretty good showing. And something I would consider when looking at, like what do they come the tops of. If somebody's running an 11 person event and they win an 11 person event, I don't like take that deck as seriously as if they won a 40 person, and I don't take that one as seriously as if they won a 100 or a 200, and I don't even care about the cost of it. Like I won't lie and say that I've gone to events where I've paid more money than what I probably should have for the least amount of prizes, just because I'm a very competitive person and I like to play in competitive events, and I'm a sucker for that. So I always consider it based on the people count. So with that being said, do you guys, before we get into, do you guys have any thoughts on the decks that I threw in as tier 1, tier 2, or possibly seen, or do you just want to dive into decks?
No, I'm pretty much on the same page with it. I think that's an accurate assessment so far from what we've seen leading up to it. The only other leader that probably is worth mentioning for me that I've seen locally is Ahsoka. I think that she's something that might be of a dark horse. And coming up here for the next season, we might see maybe 1 or 2 Ahsoka decks that might make it up to the upper echelons there. But yeah, I do agree. It's a pretty accurate representation.
I mean, I know Crispy's gonna hate that, but does anyone else other than Crispy play Fennec? Like, is it like a bunch of locals by him that play it? I don't see many Fennec as like a rogue deck. I've never seen that at all, other than like the one that I would run occasionally by anywhere in Eastern Michigan, at least.
We have seen it. I've seen that in Lando. And actually, technically, that Lando and Asajj has kind of been like a big thing that's been around. And I agree with you that Crispy is the only one that's made it popular, but I feel that the Fennec deck has legs that we aren't seeing in some of the other types of decks, because I think it counters some of the other decks that we have out there.
I also don't think Hero Ball was really too much of a thing.
I did that. I did that for you. That was for you, David.
Despite like me and one of my buddies play it, they were the only people playing it, and still one. I mean, it's mostly buoyed because like green blue hero is super strong, unless like because Bulba's actually that good. He does mess with the math a lot though, and that can like really work to your advantage in certain matchups.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the same way. We haven't seen a ton of Krennic do real well, but we have seen Krennic do well for the pure fact that he gets that instant buff because of stupid ping damage, right? Ping damage, Krennic automatically just like, oh, thanks, guys. That's what I needed you to do,
Yeah, we'll probably see more Krennic once we start getting with the next wave that does uncancelable damage. We'll probably start seeing more Krennic pop up then.
What did you call the damage? Uncancelable?
Yeah, it's uncancelable. Uncancelable.
Uncancelable. Okay, I got you.
Uncancelable. I
think that's it's indirect damage. That's what you.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know 100% how to do this. I don't know if we need to go over like the each of the cards in this deck, right? Because we've covered these decks before. This is not something we haven't covered on our Chaos of War, right? Like we've covered these decks before. So I guess, Alex, do you think we should go over every single card of the deck, or do we just kind of want to talk a little bit about like the mechanics, how to play the deck, or like how to defeat the deck, what the deck wants to do? What do you think?
I mean, maybe I'm just trying to think because we've gone over these decks a lot, and they're evolving slowly. There's minor tweaks here and there, especially with the ones that you picked out. But like, I'm not sure if we've gone over like Red Quinlan, so maybe we go through that one, and maybe go through like a Krennic, or maybe like Phil's Luke deck or something, or Crispy's Fennec. But like the pretty big ones, I think, is just like, hey, here's the big highlights. Here's what this deck is trying to do. Here's how it changed slightly over time. I think that'd just be a little bit straightforward and easy.
Oh, fair enough. So JJ, you want to take Sabine? You don't have to go over every card, but just kind of let's go through our model.
So this is pretty much the standard Sabine deck, Sabine ECL, I should specify, that we've seen over the last few seasons so far. Very aggressive style playing deck, wants to get out units out there early and do a lot of big damage. The version that we have on here is the one that comes with the Darksaber on here, which if you end up putting it on Sabine herself, she becomes a absolutely terrifying monster there. She does have big units that can come in and just wipe any obstacles in its path with like Wrecker or Poe Dameron on there. Typically wants to get started early and wants to bring in units fast and quick just to put the pressure on your base and take it out before the time runs out on Sabine. Best way to get through Sabine is to have a lot of delays, disrupt her rhythm, make sure that you can take out her units when she runs out of steam there. The more you can delay the game on a Sabine deck, the worse it is for Sabine. It becomes harder for Sabine to keep up that tempo if you're constantly blocking the unit, either by removing it off the board or by having a sentinel unit, which forces her units to attack first before it can go into your base. It also is less likely for that Sabine player to use her ability to tap their own base to cause damage to your own base if they have the fear that they're not going to be able to push enough damage through in time, and also giving time for your deck to get up and running and then pushing in damage into her deck before she can respond to it. Typically, Sabine decks don't have any sentinel at all or any way to block damage from going into their base, so they want to prevent you from getting to their base first. So that's typically the way you want to take on a Sabine deck, is handle units, force her units to engage your units, and you should have an easy time to take out Sabine if you need to.
Yep, I think one of the other things to note, like, because this deck does evolve and it does change and it is going after, like, I think we've seen some of the timelies come out of there, right? Because they have to worry a little bit about putting bright hopes in to ensure that the space decks. And I think when we talk about, this against other aggro decks, like, does this match up against other aggro decks? What is the hardest matchup for Sabine? So I don't know. Alex, is Cad Bane or Django worse for this deck?
I mean, I think Django potentially is pretty solid because you're also an aggro deck, but you can against the other aggro deck, so you kind of gain a lot of tempo, and that's pretty critical in an aggro matchup. Roughly the same. That is a lot of like the ping damage, the exhaust. You can drop something, like hit someone for one with Cad Bane and then hit them with like a Daring Raid, and that's like 3 damage, so you can kill like a Battlefield Marine or something like that. Park in Town, just the ping and then take out their first turn play is very, very popular. Or Daring Raid and do the same thing. Like Django does that too. So I can see those doing pretty well. I know you were not super high on Boss Blue against Green Sabine, but depending on how experienced both players are, that can go in Bosk's direction, because there's a lot of healing in that deck, and if you stall out Sabine, you generally have a better position than she.
Yeah. So. No, and I do actually agree with you. I do think it has some play into there. I just don't think it has as much play as people thought. Like, people were thinking Boss Blue was an auto win against Sabine, and I just don't think that's the case anymore. Like, I don't. Yeah. I think it's understanding how to play against that type of a deck. Like, You don't have a board wipe till turn 8. So turn 7. I think the other thing is to understand that as much as this is an aggro deck, this also is a toolboxy feel, right? Like you have K2SO, which can discard a card. So if they are another aggro deck playing a bunch of units, K2SO doesn't have to go to the thing. He can discard a card. Poe can discard a card out of your own hand to make them discard. Poe can get rid of upgrades. Poe can just do 2 damage to something. Poe is super dirty. And so, like I've seen this deck like come back against something like a Bosk like really easily once you Poe hits the board, as long as there's other units and stuff. So I think that's one of the big things. The ECL is the thing that I think keeps this deck on the top of the meta. I don't think if you ran a 30 health Sabine, it would be quite as good. But I do think that 30 health or that 25 health base, like that ECL base is just, I don't know. We see it all of the time, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, like it enables pretty silly things with Poe and Wrecker,
Yep. Or a K2SO, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't even cost you anything.
Just the 5 health on the base, which is pretty
sure.
negligible in an aggro deck.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the next one I have was the Django Tarkentown, and I'm going to call this the Django Tarkentown Space deck because it's different than my deck. I don't give a shit what people say. There's a difference between my deck and this deck. So this is another one that we've gone over a lot as well. This one has evolved too since we've done this. They aren't running some of these one-off things. They're not running as much of, but again, and that's the beauty of these decks is they tweak them based on what they're seeing, right? So when we talked in the first segment, we talked about, when you want to grab a deck, what do you want to grab, right? You want to grab a specific deck that says, I want a net deck. Well, there are a lot of people that don't have time to play a bunch of decks, and they do want a net deck. And, like if I've won, so for example, if there's 4 showdowns in a month in Michigan that I can go to, which there somehow is nobody's has showdowns right now, which is really scary for me. Because I was hoping we'd have a few more showdowns this time around. Because Alex always gets them. So I don't know. Maybe I should just go live on the east side of the state for like.
I haven't heard anything about showdowns at all lately, for worth.
Right. Yeah, well, I think the same here in my area. I think it's just the holidays. A lot of people just want to wait till the beginning of the new year to start putting in showdowns and stuff. Yeah.
Anyway, so the long story short is some people, like I go to a showdown, I will net deck something just to play it. I'll change a few cards that fit my playstyle, and I'll just take it because I've already won a showdown or I've already like top forward or gotten to the finals, and I'll play something new. Alex does this a lot. Alex will run different decks at every showdown. That's like, I don't know, like it's the roulette of showdowns is what I call it for him.
He's got to keep him guessing. That's why.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like I said, I think that's fair, right? But in that case, Alex probably doesn't have months and months of practice on one deck, so he's like, all right, well, I'm going to take something I feel comfortable with that I like that fits my play style. Except for when you ran a Fennec deck, and I don't want to hear any of this shit.
Usually, it's I built the deck the night before, and I just bring it like I did with the Fennec deck and the Boba deck. And the Sabine deck, but at least that one's pretty straightforward. And the Moff Gideon deck. Yeah, so half of them. Or more than half.
So because you don't have all that time to practice, people net deck, and that's why these other decks sneak into these things, especially show store downs, because people like Alex are like, all right, well, this guy ran this last time. I know how to tech against this a little bit, and I have a deck that might be able to do something better than that deck. And they don't expect that type of thing. And I think that's what this deck has done. Like, this Django deck has evolved like 3 or 4 times since, Columbus here, which was back in November, middle of November, I think. So about a month ago. And that's typical of card games. Like, that's typical of what we see. You have your staples, right? Your Phantoms, your Triple Dark Raid, your Fire Sprays, your Relentless Pursuits. But Bazine is a consideration for a main deck for something like this now if you're going to be playing more control or you're going to be playing mirrors, right? So if this deck becomes super popular, do you just run two Bazine's main deck because you know it's a great 2-drop and it can stop their turn 1 play? Like, I would argue that running the 3 Brazines over the Cartel Spacers main deck is probably a great choice for you to be able to do something going into a weekend that somebody's not expecting that. And so anyway, so I think I've tangent for long enough on that. The idea here, right, with this deck is it plays a lot of space units. It has a lot of very aggressive attacks, and it's looking to tap things down. So it does a couple of different things, like the elite P8s tap things down for Django. You don't have a ton of ambush in here, so you're setting up your units to basically essentially just sit there. You're going a little bit wide, and then you're using breaking in as a saboteur, surprise strike as pumps to just say, hey, here's the middle figure. One of the evolutions I think this deck should see is I would like to see sneak attacks in here personally. Like, I think sneak attack fits in this deck as basically like a triple dark raid for your deck, and it can work on any of your things. We've also seen like Cad Bane, like Ryan Sanazuski ran one of Cad Bane main deck. I think you should have 2 because I think Cad Bane just can wipe the board of their stuff and then allow you to clear the way with yours, type thing. Alex, if you're playing against this deck, what are you doing as a counter to something like this?
So this is a pretty popular deck, right? So that is one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier to side in Space Sentinels. Like the Concord Dawn Interceptors. Villainy is a little bit more tough because you have to get a little bit more creative with that, but you can, you have Dark Side and stuff like that. So yeah, it's mostly just, unfortunately, this one like kind of comes down to if you have enough space units or you don't. Like Obi-Wan's Aether Sprite is super good against this deck. So if you have those, generally you're okay. If you can reach that spot, having Restore is also an option. You get that blue and a little bit in green, just to kind of try to outbase them. But any space deck like this is like there's a reason the sideboard exists, and it's for you to decide the Space Sentinels or other means of control against this. Or just more like ambush space units, right? I guess you have the Azatox, you have that green 3/3 villainy card that's actually getting a little bit of play. It's not villainy, just the green 3-drop card that like the subjugating starfighter. The one was a 3/3 ambush. Then when played, if you had the initiative, you get the battle droid token. Ambush units, like the Azatox, stuff like that. That helps a lot as well. So it's just kind of, well, you see this deck, there's a reason you brought the sideboard. Otherwise, it's hard to do. It's hard to counter like a pure like space deck like that without just being prepared for it or building your deck like being able to handle these situations. Like my Bulba deck had like triple Concord Dawn and like double Bright Hope. And they're just like, I was totally fine in space because those things aren't going to go through it, even with the breaking ins. Like I can kind of get around it. Other decks, not much. They struggle.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Ray. I know this is a favorite of Alex's here. This is something Alex likes so much that he never runs it, but always talks about it.
I ran it a couple times, and then I'm just like, I never lost.
Tell us about the Ray deck. Well, then you should be. Then this is the deck you're running for the PQ, right? Because you never lost. I actually
considered it. Well, I considered running Red Ray because it's fine. It's your standard. Blue Hero's really good. Red Hero's really good. Force units are really nice. So let's just stack them all together. It has a lot of Restore. It has a lot of Sentinel. You can get to the end game. In this deck, you got double Crate Dragon, double Redemption, triple Luke. That's your end game right there. And you have triple Fel. Like you have some control in this. So it's just it's a control style mid-range deck that tries to outlast your opponent, and then going from there. Like it's pretty solid counter to the like Django decks, right? Even Sabine a little bit because you have the Sentinels, you have the Restore. Like that's really hard for Sabine to eat through if you have a lot of Restore, and your end game's generally better, right? So I mean, I think it's solid. I think Ray's really good. I mean, if you're going against Control, a little bit less so in Bosk because Bosk has means of drawing cards with like Deathmark. But if you're going against other soft control decks, the Force Throws and the Pillages, even if or like side in K2SOs, if you bring that, like they're all really strong. So yeah, this is like take this Red Ray. It's just a good all around deck. Doesn't do anything particularly incredible other than Restore, and then try to make it out. It's a lot of it's just kind of choosing the right path, like choosing the right plays, knowing when to like swing into their units and then swing into their base, or take initiative if like you're trying to play the long game.
Yeah, does this deck have like anything specific that it suffers like really hard against? Because it kind of feels like it's mostly teched to be able to handle most of the games. Your sideboard obviously has that extra pillage and the 3 top targets in it.
Yeah, this particular one, it does suffer to like extreme end game decks, right? Like what we do in Palpatine, we're just like, yeah, no, we're just playing Relentless and Devastators and Crate Dragons of our own, or like Cad Bane, whatever kind of stuff like that. It does suffer to that because like you can't be a really, really good end game deck and also be like a really, really good mid range deck that also counters aggro all at once. Because then that's a problem if all that happens at once. So it's like past a certain point, it's just like, oh well, hey, they're like milling me. This isn't great, or like their end game is just better than my end game. But at that point, you just try to side in some lower cards, maybe geared towards a little bit quicker aggro kind of thing, or play differently in game 2 or 3. So it will suffer to that. I feel like also certain decks might surprise it, like maybe like a Yellow Sabine has enough like quick like out of hand kind of like you got the Falcon right, like you have sneak attacks, you have surprise strikes where it's just like, oh, these are actually like starting to eat up because you do have a 25 health base, so you can, like, if an aggro deck manages to make you backpedal, might be hard to recover with this kind of deck.
Yeah, and you don't like boast a million Sentinels. You do have 9 Sentinels in there, but it's only 9.
Well, you have the double redemption. That's technically.
I guess. All right.
Yeah,
Like, you're right. Yeah. Usually it dies before you could do anything.
That's your meat. You're not using it as like a sentinel. I rarely take off health when I drop the redemption. I'm just like, whatever. Try to eat through this.
Yeah.
Especially with Ray, where you're just like, I'm restoring a lot anyways. Like, this is mostly to either bail me out for 8 damage or like they have a lot of space. Eat through the 6 damage, 9 health.
Yeah. And that Tarkin Town is very important for this deck because of the fact that you have the ability to drop like a perilous, position to take out their Sentinels. And then you can use your Force Throws to put a little bit of damage on. You can use the Tarkin Town to stop them for the for the space units that you just don't have as much of. But I don't know. Overall, this deck is a very well-rounded, mid-range Healy deck. Like that's what it does, and I find it a little boring to play personally, but that's just me.
I agree. That's why I don't play it more. I'm just like, this is wholly adequate, and I actually really like this deck a lot. I just don't find it terribly stimulating.
Yeah, it's not my cup of tea per se in that aspect. It's a great deck though. Like, don't get me wrong.
So it's like legitimately something I'm very strongly considering for a peak because like it has a lot of toolboxy things that I like in decks where it's just like it's very flexible and I can just do whatever I want right now. We'll figure it out later. Hopefully we don't hit the end game.
All right, let's move on to some Bosk Blue here.
Yeah.
This deck is definitely something that we saw in set 2, and it has gone 0 places since then. And this deck has, like, I don't know, like, look, they got Pelps in it now, baby. Like, Pelp is in this deck now. Like, that was not a thing in set 2, and now they're like, here, we're gonna go top end a little bit more than we did before. There's more units in here than there ever used to be, like, ever.
I love Palpatine so much. Just do 6 damage, whatever. Like, it's very strong.
Yeah, the Boss Blue decks have definitely evolved quite a bit. We've seen so many different iterations of this. And what makes this particular deck dangerous is that it does have a little bit of offense and defense mixed together, right? Because you have a lot of these blue bounty effects that number one help trigger boss's ability to deal damage, and then on top of that you could gain a benefit from it, like restoring health to your base and such, which adds to that, making it harder for you to defeat that boss. And on top of that, you have other options to bring more cards into your hand, especially if your opponent's already taking the initiative. You can take your time to put in all your targets to your opponent's side, so that way you are ready and set up for the next turn, and that way it's less of an expenditure on your side for your resources for the following turn. So as long as you can keep up the health for Bosk like high enough, you can actually be really, really effective for it. Where it struggled is when it faced off against decks that can really push in a lot of damage really fast, and Boss can't keep up at that point, or when it runs through mill decks, and the mills ends up taking out some of the bounties that help recover its health there, and that's where Boss starts to fail at that point there. With this version of this deck, I think you have enough of both where you can be an effective attacker, you can restore enough health to your side, you have a bit of control with perilous position, you can take out priority targets with your open fires, rifles falls and such, for whatever you needed to, and still be very effective there. You got end pieces with Snoke and Palpatine and Avenger and Crate Dragon, which if you can stall your opponent to get to that point, then you're in a pretty good, you're setting yourself up well to have a good end to the game and win your rounds.
Yeah. I think one of the things too is to understand, like, the evolution of this deck. This deck was a mill deck to some extent, and now this deck is saying mill is kind of a secondary option. The vigilance is used a little bit more for healing, right? And and different things. And this deck has gone another iteration. There's like another Boss Blue deck that has kind of come out that hasn't been shared publicly, so I didn't want to like put it on here. But like, there's another version of Boss Blue that's changing a little bit, maybe to reduce some of the Palpatines and add in a little bit more yellow, because this deck does very well against like most aggro decks because it can heal. Like, you could drop a top target and heal double with Bosk, which is just crazy, right? Like, that's just 12 heal. Like, that's like half your, like, I don't know. That's like, okay, for this, it's a quarter of its base, but like for a 25 health, thing, like, I don't know, Alex, how much damage can you do in one turn with your Boba? Like, on average, are you doing 10 to 12 damage a turn on average with Boba?
If they let me have a board, yeah, that closes out games super, super fast. But if they're controlling the board, which generally this will do, it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Like, this is not the deck I want to go against. Running like a yellow Boba, I'm just like, you just can't really do too much, because your end game is not better than their end game, and they're going to get to the end game, and you're not going to be able to out damage them fast enough.
Yeah. And like, so this deck suffers to ramp decks a little bit, right? And it suffers to decks that run Relentless, which is hilarious that we have that in Villain, but we don't have the same thing in Hero, right? That's crazy though, right? You stop people from playing events. I never thought about that, but Hero doesn't have a card like that. I think Hero needs a card like that. I think they do. Like, I think we should give Hero a card like that.
Ugh. As long as it's really expensive.
Well, I mean, Relentless is 9, so would a 9 cost capital ship be okay to have like that?
Yeah, sure, whatever. That's fine. If
They
it's
don't
like
ramp, so
5 or 6, then it's like, oh no, that's just bad. That's just gonna go in every deck.
all right,
Yeah.
well, that's fair. I agree with you on that. I'm saying is like, give me Relentless, but call it I don't know, JJ. What's a famous capital ship from that we don't have yet?
God, I
Tantive
don't know,
4.
actually.
What?
The Tantive 4, right? That was from episode 4.
Oh, that's fair. The
Yeah,
10T4.
There you go. Give me a Tantive 4 that's like a 9 or 10 cost that is green hero only and like stops you from, playing. I'm all for it. So anyway, this deck suffers to something like a Relentless. It suffers against like ramp decks can outperform this if they can't stop them from ramping. Villain control on the green blue side has a really good time into this. If you can stop them from milling absolutely everything. I don't know why this deck doesn't run 1 restock main board. I think that's just a must right now for a control deck, just because you don't know what you're getting. I would love that over the Rivals Fall every day. You just resource the damn thing if you don't need it. But I think that's one of the big things is understanding what the deck evolves to. But this deck really just wants to say, I'm going to mill you and heal and stop your board until I hit, my high-end resources. And then every turn I'm going to either drop a Palpatine, a Crate Dragon, a Snoke, or an Avenger. And so for me personally, this is my play style. I'm very tempted to play this, but I just like playing Thrawn better. I don't know. It's sad. I don't want to play Thrawn, but I kind of want to just play Thrawn. And so I think
fun.
It is like Thrawn is a lot more fun, especially when you go, hey, I need the top card of your deck, and they're like, ah. It's like, well, if you just show me every time, I don't have to ask you. Like, I'm gonna stop everything until you show it to me. Though that means I actually have been thinking about getting. Now I'm tangenting again. Like I need a small Star Wars side book for notes. That's what I need. A little flip pad that has a really cool villain. Ooh, JJ, Christmas present idea that you can get me. You can get me a Thrawn style little notebook, like a tiny notebook that fits in a top pocket with I'll have, you don't have to get me a pen or anything. Just get me a little Thrawn notebook. That's what I need. I need a Thrawn notebook.
Hell yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
I wish Thrawn was up in here. Anyway, anything else on the boss deck before we move on?
It's dreadfully boring.
Yeah, if you want to play, mill decks and stuff like that, they're just I'm going to end everybody hates to play against you. You are not the favorite person. I've literally had people when I play my Thrawn deck, when they figure out that it's nothing more than just a ultra hard control deck, they just go, I don't want to play you anymore. We're done playing. I've had that happen. Which, hey, you know what? In a PQ, that'd be great. Oh, you're going to concede to me? I'm good with that. Let's let me move on to the next round. I'll take the concession for the win. All right, next one we got Cad Bane Tarkentown. This is another. This came from a recent tournament, but I don't think that this is a recent deck. I think we've seen Cad Bane Tarkentown more than what we want to admit. Being able to play Underworld units, I will say, only having 2 Bazines is insane to me. I don't get that. I just put 3 Bazines. You need 3 Bazines. 3 Bazines is so good. But the Cad Bane Tarkentown, obviously the McClunkies, all the other Underworld stuff, builds this style of a deck. This is a very aggressive bounty hunter type deck, with the Ruthless Raider as a side option. And what this is doing is it's saying, hey, I'm going to maximize control your units for the first turn or 2, and then I'm going to swarm the board and aggro you to death. And if you're an aggro deck, I'm just going to be able to do that better, because I'm going to be able to play my Now There Were 2 of Us, and I don't know what the name of the card is. But...
Not even close.
All right, what's the name of the card?
Now there are 2 of them.
How is that not close? I said now there are 2 of us. You said now there are 2 of them. Whatever. It's the same thing. It's one word off. It's one word off, Alex. I don't want to hear
There's
it.
2 now.
They could have just called the damn card Rule of Two. That's all they had to say was Rule of Two. We'd know what it is. Like
Yeah.
everybody else would know exactly what that card is. Rule of Two. Thank you. I do like that card, but not in my Django deck. Anyway, but like this deck can with the way it works, it can outvalue your units early on. So against control decks, it has a little bit harder of a time. And if it can't go wide, but they have enough lower end units they can just go wide, and they have the Bazines to strip you, right? They can, and they have their sideboard is literally built to strip you your hand. Use sneak attacks to bring things in because you're gonna kill their units anyway. What do they care? I've actually I'm a little surprised there isn't a little bit more like bounties in here, but like I have seen somebody, sneak attack in a Bazine. Which whatever. Awesome. It then strips their hand, they attack it, and then they McClunky the damn thing. And I was like, oh, okay. So like they
really needed that one damage in.
I guess that's kind of what I said.
The only difference.
Yep. But I've seen it happen before where they get to use it as a way to kind of like make sure they can pick it back up, get the one damage in. They were able to take out like a one cause, like a one health unit, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Whatever. But anyway, long story short is this deck likes to look at your hand, kind of control it a little bit, and then it takes off and it runs for the races. And it's got enough bounty hunters in there that you are not going to be super happy. Once they get to that Cad Bane, good luck. I had somebody do this to me too. They played a Cad Bane, took all the units so they couldn't play that turn, swung with all their other units, picked up the Cad Bane with McClunky, killed the unit that they played down, one of the units they played down, awesome. Gave them all their units back, and then said, "Hey, do you want to play all your units?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know if I want to play any more units like after this. You just took all my units." And then sure enough, like you don't know what to do. So you claim, and then you play it, and they just play the Cad Bane again. And it was just like, all right. And Chilson isn't super fun when you had all the cards on him and had all the resources, and then all of a sudden, like now you don't have all the blue cards. Your Chilson's now with 2/2. Like that's not fun. So, JJ, have you played against the Cad Bane at all? Have you played against Cad Bane?
Yes, actually. And I've actually played Cad Bane a lot too when I first started out as well. It definitely has evolved a little bit from when it first started. I kind of miss not having a Proxima Midnight included on here just to get that little extra damage to the base there. But yeah, Cad Bane can be absolutely nasty. I think the combination as well as Forlarm and Zuckuss cannot be understated how good those two cards are when they come in, and just with how cheap they are. I mean, they can absolutely turn the tide of the game like immediately when they come in. So it's such a, for me, Cad Bane is a lot of fun. Like I always have a great time playing a Cad Bane deck.
Yeah, I mean, Bounty Hunter's energy, that works out pretty well. Like it's an effective deck. It's good.
This is a fun deck to play too. I won't lie to you. I do enjoy playing this deck. All right, now we're gonna get into Anakin Blue. Anakin Blue has been something that has been a bigger staple. That we hadn't we had kind of suspected Anakin might have been okay, and then after pre-release they're like, okay, Anakin's really good, and it seems like people have settled on blue Anakin. I thought yellow Anakin was gonna be like the thing that we were gonna see a lot of, especially because we already have like Rey Red and Han Blue. Like we already have two other heroes that do these things, but here we have Anakin Blue. So Alex, tell us. Let's talk about Anakin Blue, I guess. Tell me a little bit about the deck, your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think people settled on blue because you have Restore, so that kind of curtails its ability a little bit, so you can get more out of it. And also, blue tends to have like lower power but like higher health. And then Anakin's ability makes it so like your R2D2s, your C3POs, they hit for 3, which, you know, they should live through attacks because they have 4 health, and you're like your Yoda hits for 4, and you net neutral on it because he's got the restore. And I think people just played a lot of like Han Blue and like Red Han Blue and like Red Ray, so it's very they're used to the cards, right? Because it's very close to, it's kind of like a hybrid between like Han Blue and like, you know, Ray Red. You kind of meet in the middle, and you just outvalue your opponent because he's a nasty mid-range character, and then he comes down and he hits really, really hard. Which is why your end game is just like in this particular example, it's like 2 Grey Dragons, 3 Lukes, which isn't like a particularly stellar end game, but you also have your leader Anakin, who's, you know, hitting for 5, 6, 7 with overwhelm, and you just try to the trade and then start swinging when they have no guys.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things like to this deck that we see is I think this deck has evolved a little bit. You know, like I don't know how much people are running the tech, but the tech allows you to dump your Great Dragons early if you need to. This is like the R2D2 C3PO version, which is like the card draw version, which I'm not sold on personally as much. I feel there's other units to put in there, but I'll tell you, like the Anakin's Interceptor, we were all kind of down a little bit on that when we first revealed it. We're like, it's okay. I'll tell you what, in this Anakin deck specifically, like, okay, I understand why they built that, how they built that card. It works in your Anakin deck so much better than I ever thought it would be. And like, it actually works in almost any deck because that has a 30 health base. Because once you hit half health on that base, you play it and it's just a 4/3. It's like, yep, middle finger to you, baby.
Space seasoned short trooper, right? Like this will just be better later on, and like it's still a solid beginning piece. Because like the short troopers, like when you have 6 resources, they get 2 extra attacks, so they hit for 4. This one's if like either the base are at 15, you know, you get 2 extra attacks. So it's nice to have those kind of versatile cards where it's just like, well, this is fine early game and fine mid-ish late game. So
yeah,
that's what it is. And like space, so you don't really get those stats too much. So a 2/3 for 2 is pretty solid.
Yeah, I think one of the things with this deck is it's counting on you not being able to take Anakin out by the time Anakin comes out. Like I think that's what this deck counts on. Or if you take Anakin out, then you can't deal with Luke, you can't deal with a Crate Dragon, you can't deal with like a Poe, you can't deal with some of these things. And I think that's like the big thing with the difference between like this deck and like a Rey or this deck and a Han, which we haven't got to Han yet. But yeah, like the big thing is this deck has no heals, but this deck is like the epitome of a mid-range. This has like, where's my healing? Yoda and Luke. Like I guess Kanan heals. I guess I will grant you that Kanan heals, even though I don't know how often you get that heal off before somebody just kills Kanan.
There's been, I think, 5 or 6 times now where I have milled someone with Kanan and not healed because it was a neutral card and it has no aspects. I don't know how this keeps happening to me in real life, but I'll just be like, I'll hit him and he'll mill like a like the mercenary gunship, right? And I'm just like, great, cool, nothing. Or like a confiscate or a restock, and I'm like, what is this?
You're like, thank you. Why'd you do this to me?
I managed to get the swing off with Kanan, and I hit a neutral card, and this keeps happening. It's not okay. They don't have Sabine in here, so you don't even get like the 2. It's just like you get a mild benefit out of Kanan, and also he can also swing for 6 with Anakin's ability, which is really scary. One shot them all.
He can, and that's what I learned during pre-releases. That like, my God, like he's just blah. He's just be a bully. All right, the next one we have is Han 1 yellow, and like I think, I don't know, we originally kind of looked at this deck and said, oh, maybe this is just a passing phase, but I feel like this deck is like really here to stay, and I think this deck got like huge upgrades in set 3. Like Plo Koon and Enfys Nest are just like two amazing cards in my opinion.
Well, and R2D2, the yellow one, is nuts.
Yeah.
But also, like, Villainy Boba's gone, right? And that was, like, not holding it down, but really competing with it. And now that it's not there, it's just like, oh, this might legitimately be one of the better decks, too. It's, like, up there with Green Sabine and Ray and Django and all that.
Yeah. And this deck is a lot harder to deal with because of the fact that they have the DJ Tech combo where they can just basically give you a middle finger and say, I'm going to steal a resource and then I can kill your resource. So like, oh no, you're at 6 resources. Now you're at 5. All right, next turn I'm going to put another resource down. Oh, now you're back to 5 resources again because I'm Han and I'm just a dick. Like,
that's why
I don't know,
have to have something to kill a DJ.
Yeah.
Or be like Palpatine and not really care, right? But like mostly just like have an answer for DJ. Like that's kind of, which is rough because he's 5 health. But at least he's coming out on like 5, so you either kind of have a board or I mean, if you're villainy, you got Force Choke. That works really, really well, but you know, you're not always gonna have that. You know, got to do something like Perilous Position. Brings them down to 3 health, or you know, just find some way. You have to be like mentally prepared for yourself, which also works in like Han's advantage, right? If you're just like, I don't have a DJ, but they don't know that, so they might just like hold off or assume that I have a DJ and trying to play around that or whatever, or like playing their cards really early just to maximize their resources, and you're kind of bluffing them half the time. But also, like, Kira helps with that, right? Like, you can name Force Choke and just be like, hey, that costs 4 now. Have fun.
Yup. That's super horrible. Kira, and I said this before. I said, like, I think Kira, and we're going to see this a little bit too. I think Kira has a place in hero decks that we kind of just, like, shied off of. Like, the last thing, it's like, yeah, whatever. But, like, if you could put a few units out, like, Kira stalls whatever they're going to do for a turn or two. Like, I won't lie and say, like, I've had my own Kira where I would like to flip her, kill their Han, deal with all of that, because I have an overwhelming barrage, and here comes Kira down and it goes, oh yeah, overwhelming barrage. Now you got to pay what, 7, 8 for it or whatever. Like, I'm never gonna afford that with Kira. Like right now, like there goes my whole churn because I resource something else, and because people aren't expecting that. I think people will start to expect it, but I still think like it's kind of like that regional governor was a 1-4. This is a 3-5. She's got 1 extra health, and I don't care what anybody says, but that 5 health, like, that's pretty big. Like, there's 2 cards at 5 costs or less that take care of that, without having extra special conditions. Like, it just like doesn't exist all over the board.
That's why you play Boba and then just drop a mod and go Horde one-shotter.
all right, whatever.
You do the same thing to Sabine's. Is really funny because, you know, you drop the Monocore for 4. But also, like, they could see your hand and just call Monocore. Like, I agree, though. Kira's, you know, pretty solid. It kind of goes back to, like, hey, heroes don't have a relentless. Kira's kind of like that, right? Like, you just call it a bet that you don't want them to play. Like, your Super Laser Blast costs 11. You know, you don't even have it in your hand, but I'm just going to call it now because Bossk is ruining my life right now, and I don't want him to Super Laser Blast my field.
Yeah, and being able to play Spark of Rebellion on turn 1 and not care is so good. Like, it's just like, I do not care. Do whatever you want. And like L337, like, it's funny because we talked about how much we loved L337 before. Like, we've openly stated that's like one of the better smuggle type cards, and like, but nobody cared because people weren't capturing. Well, guess what Cad Bane does, and guess what Cad Bane? How many decks Cad Bane's in now, right? Oh, I got an L337. I'll just take that guy back. Thank you. Like, screw you.
I have done that a fair amount, actually.
Like, it's just
I need my Echo-based defender back, sir.
Yep. Thank you. Like, and it cost me 2 resources. It cost me 2 resources. I guess it costs a little bit more if you play it smuggled, right? But still,
it costs you 4.
Yeah, like,
but also,
whatever.
Like Yellow Boba, you also, because smuggle's a keyword, you can also give someone plus attack. So like you get even a little bit more benefit there. But yeah, I mean, like on Yellow, very good. It's interesting to see the double Han, double Ephes in this. But Ephes could, you know, she's just kind of a monster. If your opponents aren't expecting it, she just like just massive tempo swing, just swing in for 5 and bounce back something 4 power or less, which is like upload Coon because he'll coordinate rate 3, right? He only has 3 attack. Or a bunch of stuff like the most of the ships Django plays, right? You can bounce back a raider, which I've done, a little bit sketchy, but taking 2 to your base is less than 4 to your base. Okay,
so gross.
sometimes you need to do
it.
Yep. Well, and if you think about it too, right? Like the hero has like we saw a lot of Bulba yellow, and I guess I don't want to harp on this deck a lot. This is a deck that I wish I played more of because I really think that this is a deck that like I like. It fits a semi toolboxy control style that I prefer in how it operates. But like before we talked about Bulba Yellow, the big thing's cunning. You don't get cunnings. Bulba Yellow has a harder time. This thing's got Kira, cunning, Cantina Bouncers, and Enfy's Nest now. Like it's no longer just like and if you like if you have Enfy's Nest on the board the next turn, if you have a Spark in hand, you know what you could do? You could bounce it back and then strip the damn thing if they don't play it right away. Like, oh, you didn't play it back down? Take that. Sucks to be you. You should have, like, why did you swing with a unit? You should have not done that. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just, there's weird, cheeky things that this deck does that, like, I don't know. Like, how about this? I like the fact that we have this style of a deck. I'm not super excited to play against it. Whenever I run up to this deck and have to play against it, it kind of goes, this is not going to be a fun game. But this deck is actually really fun to play out.
Do you think they'll ever like errata or change Han to only hit his own resources and not any resource?
I don't think they will, but it would be smart.
Will impact this deck.
Well, if they did, this deck almost dies, right? Like this style of deck does. You can have like that's when Han Green comes back, I think.
That's fair.
I don't think no. The answer is unless this deck all of a sudden dominates absolutely everything, which we're not seeing. I don't think this deck. I don't think Han will ever get eroded. Personally, I think that he'll cash out before he gets eroded. Personally, but I think because we don't have the yellow Bulba, this is a great if you played yellow Bulba for set 1 and 2, this is a great way to step in. Like you could just take this and it's very similar in its like elements, except for you don't get the stupid fire spray ready, right? But oh no, I have a Millennium Falcon though that could come in ready. So like I don't know what to tell you. Like I have 2 of them. Oh, the same thing. Like they can both come in ready if you do it right. So I don't know. I like this deck so much. I'll be honest. This is probably my favorite deck that I would love to play that I don't play. There. I should play this deck, but I don't.
That's fair.
All right. Now we got Kira Green. So now we're kind of getting into like we talked a little bit about, like mandatory things. Like these are kind of some of the other decks we're seeing that are coming up. JJ, how about this Kira deck? Tell us a little bit about this Kira deck.
Yeah, so Kira, definitely one of our favorite leaders here that we've had on here. Definitely so really good. I mean, you're gonna injure your units a little bit just to give them a shield. It makes them a little more resilient from those big attacks that come in there. And if you can delay with like your sentinel units and stuff on the space side, you can absolutely bring an overwhelming force on your ground side. Combined with overwhelming barrage, this deck can just push in damage really well. You got great finishers. Your typical ones that you're going to see are going to be Vader. You're going to see Maul. You're going to see Snoke, Avengers, a lot of the big ships that come in there to finish off games. And then they also have enough health to really benefit from Kira's ability as well there. The thing that this deck really suffers from is, and from what I've seen, is control. If your opponent is able to exhaust your units or remove units easily, especially damage units that have low health early on, then you can kind of struggle to have a presence on the ground. Or if you just don't have enough coverage on space, then Kira tends to be weak on that side, since a lot of the big units on most Kira decks tend to be ground units on there. So space tends to be a weakness for Kira, especially if you're able to get some of those cheap units that can go in and do damage a lot on the space side. There, Kira can go down quickly, but still, this is a very useful deck. It would be. With Vigilance, I've seen it used a little more defensively to give health over to her, to the base, in order to help her delay the game a little bit longer to bring in a lot of those units, and especially with the reinforcement walker as well. But if you're able to take out those pieces, if you're able to mill the cards so that way she can't do that, or remove those reinforcement walkers out of there, and prevent her from being able to recover, you do have a pretty good shot at taking out this deck here. She does struggle a little bit against defense decks, but there are different variations of Kira that help counter those type of decks as well.
Yeah, I think the big thing is the decision to switch from like a 25 health base to the 30 health base, right? Like they don't want the ECL. I still run a Kira ECL a little bit more. But the addition, like, and I would also run Relentless main deck, no matter what version it is. I would not run 1 Devastator and 3 Avengers. I would be running 2 Relentless, period, no matter what. Yeah, but I think Kira is that mid-range control style deck that can go late game if needed and can be early game as needed. This deck is crazy because it only has 2 Vaders in it. Like that's a choice, baby. That's a choice.
Yeah.
But I think this deck struggles against, the big thing that it struggles against is that Jango Tarkentown deck, right? That Jango Tarkentown deck can just really just eat this thing alive because it has so many space units. If you can't, if they can control your units, you're doing an overwhelming barrage on an exhausted unit. You're not getting the damage in. You have a harder time stopping everything for it. The Vigilance is funny because when I this is a similar deck to what I took to top. Well, I was 11th, top 16 at a PQ in set 2. I was only running 2 Vigilance main deck, but the need to have that extra healing against some of these more prominent aggro decks that we're seeing. Against Boba, you didn't need it because Boba wasn't an aggro deck that went to your base. He was ramping right along with you. So this deck actually didn't struggle against Boba as much because it was like I could ramp with you for it. So I don't know. I think Kira still has a place. I think Kira still is there. I will tell you, like, if you want to like kind of a similar, this is like a Krennic style or an Iden Green style deck, like that's what this is. And Kira's just main goal is to control their leaders and help change the game pace back to your side of the field. Other than that, there's other things you can run. I think Kira, in my estimation, like as much as I love Kira and I loved her set 2, I think Kira, like some of the newer leaders are kind of fun to run too. So it's a little hard for me to say we should only be running Kira, which is what I was saying in set 2.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for Kira?
It's a personal thing. Do people locally by you run a lot of Kira?
No, me. It's me. Okay. I'm the guy that runs Kira.
No one really is running Kira by me anymore. So I was just curious if you seen it like pop up, if it was still like a thing over there or not.
Not personally over by me because a lot of people. Our side is like super aggro side of the state. Like we're the aggro side. You guys are like the fun side. We're the aggro side. But it is making top 8 in some of the larger tournaments. So
sure. I was just curious if like it's popular locally.
No,
that
just
might
Tanner.
Affect, like PQ stuff for Lansing, right? So
I don't, unless I run Kira or my son runs Kira, I think you're fine. I think if one of us runs Kira, then you'll see a little bit of it. I think you'll see some. I think you'll see some of it. I really don't think you're going to see a lot of as much Kira as we were seeing. So I don't know. This deck does very well into Bosk. So if Bosk and some of these control decks start popping up, like even against like Pelp, I don't have as much of an issue against Pelp as like I do against some of the aggro type decks. You know. All right, Quinlan is next. Alex, what is this Quinlan deck? And I think this is the deck we said we're going to go over because I don't think we've actually gone over more than one of these decks ever.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've never played against one. Yeah,
But I know
Really?
this is on the rise. Like,
Yeah.
just so you know, I know this is a thing that's on the rise that people have been kind of like sleeping on a little bit.
A fair bit of my locals play it, so I'm kind of used to it. Yeah, so it's like Tarkentown Quinlan, right? This particular deck, which is close to kind of what I see. You'll see, the 9 cards changed, but this has a triple Force Choke, double Hotshot Blaster, double Daring Raid, triple A-Wing, triple Sabine, triple Sparkle Rebellion, double Grogu, triple Surprise Strike, triple of the yellow R2-D2, double Red 3, triple Ezra, triple Falcon, the 3 cost, triple Cassian, double Waylay, triple K2SO, triple Kira, triple Plo Koon, double the 6 cost Falcon, and then double Han Solo. And the side they have double of the Wolfpack, double Bamboozle, which is such a great card, underrated, double of the Disabling Fang Fighter, triple Pillage, and a 3rd copy of Han Solo. A lot of this, Quinlan, when you drop a card, generally people have 2 drops, which is funny because every time I go against a Quinlan, I'm just like, whatever. I'm going to play my Clone Deserter. Take that. I doubt you have a 1 cost in your deck. But a lot of it's like they play a 2-drop Battlefield Marine, normal classic example. You play A-Wing, you play Sabine or whatever, you ping them with Quinlan, then you Tarkentown them, and they just don't have a first turn play, and then they catch up in tempo. If you're playing on curve, it's got a wealth of 3s as well, so like you can start pinging things. Quinlan comes out on 5, and that's real nasty. And then you can just start just pinging everything. Like Plo Koon's super good. Kira, we already talked about. Ezra's pretty nice. R2-D2 is pretty strong. Grogu is actually kind of interesting in this kind of deck. Just it's not. It's like an aggro leading mid range. Grogu being able to exhaust some of their anyone. Like you get exhaust leaders if you wanted to. That really helps. Just kind of control stuff until you wear them down on tempo. And it's pretty solid. I don't think I've lost to a Tarkentown Quinlan, but also my decks tend to be like kind of weird for Quinlan to do anything against. Also, very funny when they flip Quinlan and you're just like, cool, I'm going to play Plo Koon with my yellow Boba Fett and then also just swing for 7 and auto kill Quinlan. Doesn't happen much, but
I was like, that's one of the few times you can do that, though, right?
Yep.
Like that, he is not easy to kill.
Yeah, Quinlan coming out on 5 with the 3/7 potty is that's the only time that's gonna happen, right? Especially at 5 resources, and that's because you didn't control my board or whatever. But yeah, no, it's just pretty solid mid range. Again, a little bit aggro leaning mid range. Those pings are just enough to do some work. But man, does it not like Obi-Wan decks. Because there's a fair amount of people playing Obi-Wan by me, actually. All sorts of colors, blue, green, yellow. And those pings, they don't do too much. That makes them real sad.
Yeah, especially because Obi just feels like I played Django against Obi, and it was funny because like I dropped that P7 and I got to exhaust them, but then like the 1 damage, and then they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna heal that," and I'm like, "Ah."
He's just like, whatever.
There goes my Tarkentown. My Tarkentown no longer works. Yeah, against Obi, this deck probably has a really hard time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like this is we're now into the decks where I say, hey, this is not like you're going to always see this, but I do think this is a contender for a lot of people. And I won't lie and say this is a kind of a fun deck to run. Like I've ran this deck once and it was pretty fun. It's not my favorite. I just like Sabine better. But like I don't think the Sabine overall is probably better than Quinlan as a leader. But I will say like Sabine is a lot more fun to run as a deck than this one is. Like this one's okay. It's not a bad deck to run. And again, then we talk about like they have some red cards in here. But like I just feel like Han Yellow just as a double yellow is a lot more fun to run personally.
Because you like messing with your opponents.
I do. It's a scummy thing about me. That's why, like, when the XWA changed some of the points for X-Wing, and I can now play CIS again with like weird combo things, and I can play Scum like with insane stuff. Or I can run 2 defenders and Vader. How about that? And actually win a game. I don't even know how that's possible. That's a whole different podcast that we don't need to. I like Scum, and I've always liked Scum, and that's like, if you go back to the origins of our podcast, like way back, like 3 years ago, origins of our podcast, like with Charles. Charles was a big Scum person. Charles is the one that screwed me over and got me into Scum in X-Wing, and so like now that's the style I like. And I like that. Like when I played Destiny, it was kind of the same thing. I like Yoda Mill because it messed with people, and I liked a lot of the weird go wide. Like I used to run Wat Tambor and Grievous, and I don't remember the other stupid character, but I used to like weird go wide, like mess with you decks. Like thank God we don't have the way to get 3 colors in standard yet. Like when we get 3 colors in standard, that's what I'll play. And I'm not talking hero villain, Chancellor Palpatine. I have been playing that though, by the way. We should do an episode on that. That's what we should do. That would be fun. You two need to be playing some Chancellor Palpatine. Come on.
Well, not for a PQ, but I'll definitely give it a go. Yeah.
Why not for a PQ? It'll be fun.
Because man, I have the Thrawn bug, man. I want to give Thrawn a go again. I really do.
I know. Stop saying that, because I have 2 PQs coming up that I have to play for, and I don't know what I'm going to run for either of them. But Thrawn became a contender after I won a lot with Thrawn. All right, let's move on to Baby Han Blue. We've gone over this deck quite a bit as well. This is similar to the Rey deck, except for this deck doesn't focus on the healing. It focuses on getting units out early. Now I wonder, like, what could you do with a sneak attack in this deck? Like, is that just bad? I don't know if that's bad. I kind of like that. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, we don't need a theory craft. Like Tanner's weird decks. I do not like Karabas in this deck. I will just openly state that I thought we were past Karabas, but it does work very well. You bring a Yoda in on turn 1. You can play a Karabas turn 2. You're not really doing much to your board, but you can do that type of a thing. This deck is the same thing. It wants to control a lot of what your board is. It doesn't care as much about the healing until you get to the end. That's what the redemptions and the Lukes are there for. And then his goal is to kind of stop you with the Crate Dragon or the maces that can swing several times in a turn. And like, so this deck is very like mid-rangey with some elements of control in it. You have the K2SOs, which they use a lot for, though. I will tell you, nobody should just run 2 K2, just run 3. I run 51 cards. I don't give a shit. Just why are you running 2 K2SO? I would, or cut a Cassian for K2SO. How about that? Anyway, whatever.
I agree.
And this deck doesn't have village people in it either, right? Like there's no village people in this deck. But this deck did come in first this weekend in like a 40-person tournament. And again, this deck is similar to that Rey Red where it just wants to control you, but instead of doing the healing, it wants to get units out a turn earlier so that it can do damage. Like, I won't lie and say bringing an Obi-Wan out as a 4/4 on, your turn 5 when you flip Han, like, is pretty good because if they have to kill that Sentinel, it gives Han the ability to have the thing, the stuff on him, or if you have a Poe that you played the turn before, there's just all sorts of weird little things that this deck can do. That you aren't getting with some of the other decks by bringing its units out earlier. Bringing the Crate Dragon out on turn 8 before they can play a Super Laser Blast is awful. I will testify from personal experience that that's not fun, because then you're just eating 8 damage. Like, you're like, oh, I wiped your board, but I'm eating 8 damage, which is almost the same as like a Crate Dragon at 10,
Yeah. That's gross. I've never seen that happen, but that's hilarious.
Happens to me all the time. My son plays this deck, so that's probably part of the issue. Is he likes to bring his Great Dragon out early just to fuck with my Super Laser Blast.
Eat the 8.
Yeah, you do. You eat the 8 because it's better than eating 10. So, unless that's all he has and you play Power of the Dark Side, and then I'll eat 3 any day of the week, or Fell the Drag. But I don't get that lucky usually where I have one of those. So yeah, anything Alex, anything to contribute about this deck? I mean,
we went over it. It didn't really change too much into set 3. Like, you had a couple perilous positions and like make an opening, right? Like, that's basically it. Nothing crazy here. Just kind of try to win on efficiency.
Yeah. So, all right, let's go on. Now we're kind of into these are possible decks, which we don't have to spend a lot of time on because I don't think you're going to see a million of these things, but I do think you're going to see this. This is the random. Like, I found this. I read the random Mando, even though Alex and I both disagree that this is the yellow Palpatine deck that you would play. This is probably the more popular one you're going to see over what Alex and I would normally run. But this is a thing though, right? Yellow Palpatine is a thing that's coming back, and it struggles still a little bit to like aggro, but it doesn't struggle against a lot of other things. So, and it is crazy what this deck can do. Like, this deck is just like, I don't know, it's Palp, right? So we're finally seeing a Palpatine like rise to the top a little bit, and this is a deck I guarantee you I would watch out for this deck. And if you don't know how to play against this deck, you're going to be very sad. So Alex, how would you play against this deck?
Yeah, so like I have my own yellow Palpatine. It's okay. It's a little bit similar to this. This is mostly just, you got the resupplies, you got the super laser tech. You try to ramp up. You have the no good to me deads, the Kintan intimidators, right? If you need to exhaust the big units, then like Sabine. You got a fair amount of ambush. Mine has more than this, but I try to lean into that more. This one has double Cloud Rider and like the triple Syndicate Lackeys. I like the 5 attack on the Lackeys, honestly, over Bosk, because there's a lot of things that have 5 health, like a DJ that just stole your resource because you're at 5 resources. Now you can just kill them with a Syndicate Lackey. It's really nice. But yeah, just control their board. Try to get the end game. Cad Bane mops things off real nice. I actually don't run Vaders in my Palpatine deck, which is wild. That's mostly because I just have a bunch of ambush. Like I don't need to play a Vader when I can play a Syndicate Lackey. I have the malls for that if I needed to reach higher. But yeah, just get to the end game. Yellow does that pretty well between bounce and exhaust, and it's got some tricks. I'm sure he's iterated off of this. I'm sure he's put more than one Cad Bane in there. But yeah, just try to exhaust, try to get to the end game. And I mean, that's what Palpatine does. And that's what this does. Yeah, I mean, it's just hopefully your end game's better than theirs, and generally it is, but it gets a little bit dicey if it's like Kira or something, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the big thing, right? Is like this has a hard time against aggro to some extent. But this deck does work very well against mid-range control. Like it does. Like I think Kira can knock this deck out, but against a Palpatine blue, Kira suffers a little bit more than this deck does. But it is funny when the Palpatine drops the, merciless gunship, and then you steal it, and then they can afford to steal it back because they have more resources than you. So you're just like, well, whatever. All right, yeah, so that was a waste of resources. It's just hilarious. It is weird with only one Traitorous in there and only one Cad Bane. I do actually kind of agree with you a little bit with the Vaders. Like Vader's not as necessary in Palp Yellow. I don't think.
Yeah, you have Cad Bane. And you have Maul. Like, you can clean up pretty nicely.
Yeah, you're running Walkers and you're running Devastators. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
although I gotta say, playing the gunship and then choosing sides and giving them the gunship for one of their units.
And then buy it back with 4 resources.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's got to be that's got to be such a hell of a move. I love it.
Yeah, and that Change of Heart is like one of the best like villain control cards that is ever.
People
like I
don't
have,
expect Change of Heart. I love Change of Heart. It's so good.
yeah, I have one in my sideboard, for Django, Target Town, just for the pure fact that if like I'm playing against a control deck that drops something dumb because they rammed higher than me, I can just steal it from them and then use it. It's like, yeah, sucks to be you. Like,
I main deck it in my Boba yellow deck because I'm just like, it's a tempo deck. If we get to the end game, my end game's like Han and FS and home one, so it's like it's fine. But sometimes they're just like, oh, drop some super annoying unit. I'm just gonna take that right now, then swing in harder. Or like, man, they really loaded up this Echo base defender. It'd be a shame if I just took it right now and have all their units run into it.
Yep, it's like a better traitoress, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Another one that I think you'll see a little bit is Krennic Green, and it's only because of the pings. I think if ping, like in set 2, Kira Green 100% like was better than Krennic, but in this set, Krennic has the advantage because everything gets the +1. It's a lot better than like people give it credit for. It is some of the choices in this are a little weird, personally, I think, but you know, just the fact that you could have a Dr. Pershing that has 4 damage on him and you could swing with him if you wanted. It's just, or not 4 damage, 1 damage, you know, the +1. You just swing with him to take out a unit. It's hilarious, right? Like, it's just like, yeah, I could just do it anyway. Like, I could take out your Greedo if I want.
I'm definitely like, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like Krennic. I've always liked Krennic. This deck's ratios are kind of wild to me, but like, I mean, he's solid. It's just efficiency because you have the +1 attack now because your units are damaged. The Royal Guard attaches come in damaged anyways, and they're just like a 3/3, which is really nice. But yeah, I mean, like, it is what it is. Like, it's solid. We saw it a lot in set 1. It hasn't really looks like it's been iterated too much for set 3, other than like the attaches, and this one's got Grievous and the calculated Magna droids, but only one of those, which is wild to me because those things are so good.
Yeah, I run, you know, always 3 of those things, almost always.
Yeah. But it's fine. I don't have like too much. It plays very similar to, you know, Kira. A little bit, because you know Kira has like that weird bomb move that she does when she flips, but other than that, it's pretty similar. They're trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, the difference is this one wants to give the extra damage, kind of like what Boba does every time something's damaged, and Kira is just more like going all out with the bomb control. That's it. I guess Krennic does heal though. Like Krennic does have a heal on him. Like people like sleep on that a little bit.
He does restore, yeah.
So
which is pretty nice.
You don't get that with Kira. There you go. So we have 2 more. This is kind of the Luke Green that we have.
Yeah, that's actually one of my semi-locals. Like he's a little bit further away. We don't play at the same store, but we see each other all the time at like the store showdowns and whatnot. This is just the power of blue-green hero, right? Like very strong. He's good. He helps against the pings. But also it's just like he's got General's Blade. He's playing, you know, the Obi-Wan at 4 resources or whatever. You got home 1, you got Luke's, you got U-Wing reinforcements. Shields are really good. Luke's pretty solid. Just tune whatever sideboard you want. I think he's iterated off of this. I'm not sure if he got rid of the Barrises or not. But you know, it's again, blue-green hero is really good. Choose a leader. Choose Obi-Wan. Choose Luke. Choose. I mean, I'm still all for Boba. I've seen a couple Yoda greens. I don't think they work out too well, but blue-green hero is really nice right now with General's Blade. A lot of Jedi. floating around. So that's kind of what it is. It's kind of like how blue-green villainy is pretty solid too. Same thing, but the other side.
Yep. And I think like this one here, it feels a little light on the Sentinel piece of it as well. But like the Barris and the Mazes are really strong. Like that's a great turn 1 type play. If you don't have your Alliance Dispatcher, and it's just there's so many good value tempo plays. And like you said, that General's Blade, you could get Luke out early with that. Like it's crazy, right? You can put that on Yoda and get Luke out because that's a 2 discount. So you could get Luke out the same turn you bring your other Luke out. Seems pretty good to me.
Yep. I believe it is worth noting that Luke Leader is actually not a Jedi.
Wait,
So
what?
Yeah, he's not a Jedi.
No, he's not a
He's
Jedi.
just a Force. Yeah,
That's what?
he's a Force rebel.
Oh
So
my
you
God.
actually have to do it with literally all the other Jedi you have in your deck, which is a ton of them.
That's crazy. How does that work?
He
Luke.
wasn't a Jedi yet, I guess.
Okay, whatever. He was the
I mean,
last
it's in the movie.
Jedi.
You're not a Jedi yet.
He wasn't the last
Bullshit.
Jedi. I saw that movie, sadly.
No, that was a good movie. I like the movie. All right, well, let's not talk about Star Wars movies. That'll distract
I'm
us. Let's not go down that road. That's something we could discuss that for a long time. So this is a very solid mid-range deck that has it's similar to that Anakin blue, except for it's got the green feel to it. There's no ramp in this deck. It's just, I guess, I apologize. There's a little bit of ramp in this deck. But this deck is focused more mainly on controlling you and then just overwhelming the hell out of you. And like that home 1 being able to bring back a Yoda, like that's really good. Like, I don't know.
No, you bring back like the Village Protectors, man, or the Concord Dot Interceptors.
Really? I always like my Yodas coming back. That's what
Well, I
I'm
mean,
thinking.
it's nice, but like if you just like no one expects you to drop a Sentinel out of nowhere while also dropping home 1, so like it's nice, especially if you still have like Luke out and you can give it a shield. This is kind of a shame that he doesn't have more. Like he has a lot of Sentinels, and he went with like Triple Bright Hope instead of like the Concord Dawn Interceptors. But if you get like a bunch of cheap Sentinels and then just drop Luke, it's just a pain, especially if they're like he doesn't have Echo Base in here. But if he has the Echo Base Defenders, just like that's a 4/3 that now has a shield that you have to like 2 for 1 yourself just to get rid of this thing, and that's fun.
Yeah. And the last deck that I have is the Fennec Tarkentown deck, which Alex already gave me shit for putting on here. But I think it's more important than people give it credit for. And so Alex, you took this and you topped with yours, right? Like this wasn't like something
I did,
you did, yeah. So like it's not something that's like a shame or we should be like oh my gosh.
Oh
this is
no,
not
it's just
gonna
like no one plays this. Like it's like a super rogue deck.
Yeah.
And I think it's solid. I actually tried a little bit for the first couple of weeks of set 3, and I had like heavy in there, and that was really funny to like, oh, they flip Maul. Well, I'm going to ambush heavy and kill him.
Yep.
Problem solved.
Yep. Just see you later, Maul.
Yeah, well, I paid 5 for that, or 4 if Fennec was out and I play another thing. But it's interesting. It's got a bunch of cool stuff. It's mostly built on the fact that like red Rebel synergy is super good, yellow Rebel synergy is a lot better than you'd expect, and ambushing's really strong.
Yeah.
And like you can't let Fennec live. I mean, she dies anyways. She's a 4/4 saboteur. Like she dies in open fire. But like if you leave Fennec on the field, it's just she just ambushes everyone in, and that's she's such a heat magnet for that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think this deck, like I personally like this deck and I had been playing it. My nephew is on Sabine yellow now just because I think it's easier for him than this. But like I feel that this deck has like extreme legs, and I think, the problem is like they did Tower number 9 and Maddie from KTOD, and then there's somebody else that did another video on Fennec. Like it's going to become a thing where people are going to see that because like these people are more popular than we are, right? And so they get all these views on the things, and people are going to think that they can bring this deck, and I don't think you can't bring this deck, and that's why I say I feel that because we have a couple of weeks before PQ, we have a lot of top content creators saying, "Hey, look at this deck." I feel that you're going to see a little bit more of this than like we normally would. I do agree that we probably have not seen this. Like I'm the only one at my locals running this. Just like I have a local, like Lando is not like a big thing either, right? But I have a local that plays Lando all the time. I see Lando more than I should see Lando. But you're probably not going to see that at a PQ very often. So I think this is one of those sneaky decks that you should 100% watch out for. And if you haven't played this, like it is fun. Like this is a fun thing. This is a fun deck to play.
Wildly fun deck.
Yeah, like this is actually like I like my Han Yellow play better than this, but like this is it's super fun to ambush out some of these units. Like I don't know. I like it a lot. Like a hot shot blaster on a fucking R2D2, that's great, I don't know. I like this deck a lot.
I do constantly scream, watch out. R2D2's got a gun or a lightsaber,
R2D2.
Depending whatever deck I'm running. I love doing that. I'm just like, yeah, no, whatever. He's got a Jedi lightsaber. He's a 4/7. Deal with it.
Which is funny because JJ was R2D2 like the first like non-Jedi to run a lightsaber that we saw on screen? I think it was.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, get a lightsaber.
Well, technically, originally, we all thought lightsabers could only be ran by Force. Then expanded the whole thing. So,
I just don't know when he had a lightsaber. Not like active, right?
He had it. He didn't necessarily use it.
Yeah, then he
popped it out and gave it to Luke.
Edison did somewhere. Like he's just a trash can.
He's not just a. It's not just a trash can. You're going to lose all our viewers. They're going to be like, Planning Face Syndicate thinks R2D2's a trash can.
He's a trash can with a jetpack. And
oh my gosh. He's not a trash can.
I don't know, man. He's metal. He put things in him.
That's what she said. So, to answer the question in the chat, Lando does do stuff. Like, there's a Lando Target Town deck that actually is really good. Alex was experimenting with it. Yeah. I was experimenting with it. A guy at my locals is experimenting with it. Lando was at the PQ I went to for set 2. And Lando is like the one deck I did not want to play no matter what, just because they didn't have my scanning officers. You know what ruins Lando? Scanning officer. That's it. like, oh, I got a scanning officer. You're not going to play your game anymore. But that's what Lando does is like he has like everything is low to the board. And he doesn't care as much if you strip his hand because he just like everything's smuggle. Like the whole deck is basically
he's muggles things for 2 last, but you have to like dump a resource to do it, right? So he's just very super low to the ground aggro.
Yeah. So, like thank God he doesn't have a way to like recur cards from the discard pile all the time. That would just be so stupid. That would make Lando good again, I guess. Anyway, that is what it is. I think we've hit all the decks. Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to cover before we close out?
No. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I think if you're looking for PQ prep, if you're looking for these different things, this is kind of like, this is our guide for set 3. We'll probably do this every set, I guess. Like every set, it seems like to be a thing. We did it last set. We didn't do it set 1. We did it set 2. We did this set. Like I think we'll probably do it next set because I bet you the meta will change a little bit next set. Alex will get a second Boba Fett that he could run that he'll just complain about because you're going to confiscate, kill his leader because that's like the best.
I'm all about it. Like I see you have a ship over there. It'd be a shame if it just power failure all your pilots out of it.
Yeah, like I don't have to tell you. Yeah, like
thanks for playing the Falcon.
Yep, yep. Thank you.
All the resources into it.
Yep.
Eject all the pilots. That's great.
Yeah.
There was a card in Destiny called like eject something or other. Ejection seat or something like that. So that was a thing, by the way.
Well, Boba Fett Destiny. In version 1 of X-Wing, you can dump the Boba upgrade to dump an upgrade off one of their ships.
What? How is that? How is that a legal thing?
If you hit them with a crit, you can jettison something off their ship, and that includes like titles for some reason. So it's like, yeah, you can just like rip Palpatine out of the Devastator, like space him with Boba. It was so fun.
And that
So that's
doesn't sound like
what I
any fun. That
pictured.
sounds like horrible X-wing life. That sounds like
my X-Wing
awful.
1.0 was very, very broken towards the end.
ugh. Oh my gosh! Like, could you imagine if you could do that? Well, I guess that's kind of what Confiscate is. So
Yeah, it got to the point where that was like a necessary thing, and that's why it was bad. Because you're just like, oh, we actually need Boba Fett to even like do anything relevant in this. Because Palpatine could just change a die willy nilly, post hoc, whatever result he wanted. So
yeah,
that's an entirely
that was
different
crazy.
game, and this went off the rails a while ago.
Yeah. that was in the before times. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back this week on Sunday. I promise you. My weekend is definitely not full. So I will. We should be back on Sunday with another amazing episode. It'll probably be a lot more lighthearted episode. I kind of expect the guys to give me some decks that they're playing. Maybe we'll do some cool, fun things with that. If you have a deck you want to submit that you want us to talk about, like, do that. I really want to dive into Chancellor Palpatine and do a whole episode on just Chancellor Palpatine, but I don't know if Alex and JJ are up for that or not. That might be too much for them.
He's okay.
He's fun as hell to play, though.
I don't find him terribly interesting to play.
I love him. I think he's fun. But Alex doesn't like anything but Boba Fett, so there you go.
I don't like my hands being entirely nothing but bricks.
Mm-hmm. I've not ever ran into that issue. But anyway, we're going to close the episode out. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good night, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for listening.